every area of your life as a couple will probably have a potential for conflict and disagreement and angst and give and take.
You said flourish. I was thinking growth. I think our relationship grew during
for sure.
during that time as we were kind of reinventing ourselves, because for 18 years, we had been this. I said it so clearly. How could they misinterpret that?
Welcome to Penned in Ink, a podcast where we discuss marriage and long-lasting love. Today, we are going to talk about navigating young love. We're going to go back 30 plus years into our relationship and dig up some memories about early conflict and how we work to resolve and learn and grow in our communication skills and all sorts of things related to young love. So, how you doing today?
Great. And how are you?
I'm excited. We have a packed episode. We probably shouldn't spend too much time at all gabbing at the front because we got a lot to cover today.
We do.
Today, we're going to cover basically three things. We're going to talk about early conflict. How did we learn to deal with conflicts and disagreements? Because let's be honest, all relationships have those areas where you're going to have conflict. We're going to talk about how our communication skills have changed over the years. We're going to do something I think is kind of cool. We're going to look at how do we communicate in our 20s, our 30s, our 40s. We'll stop at our 40s. And then we're going to give you guys a little look into some common mistakes that people make in relationships that we absolutely have made in ours. And we bet money you're making in yours. All right. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
Okay. When we were planning this episode, one of the first things we did is we just brainstormed on what are all the areas where you have conflict in your life. Now, if you harken back, Melissa is a mental health therapist. You work with lots of people in their relationships, so you have a lot of experience on this. So we dug up and we created a list of a whole bunch of things. Then we wanted to go ahead and pressure test that a little bit. So we went and we did all the typical things you do. We went and did an internet search. We did some AI research. We went on social medias. We talked to some friends and family. And sure enough, the list we came up with was a pretty darn solid list of things that go wrong in areas of conflict. So we distilled that down into 10 areas that we think you are going to encounter in your relationship. Now, we're not going to talk about all 10 of those today. As you'll see here in a second, those 10 cover a lot of things in life. And to dig into each of those would be an episode, probably each of those topics. And we'll probably do that down the road. But to give you guys an overview, we wanted to show you the 10 areas. And then we're going to spend some time digging down into a few of those areas. Sound good?
Perfect.
All right. So this is just really quick here. This is not all comprehensive dig into these things. Yeah. And we actually are going to put these on screen for those of you guys who are watching on video. These are the 10 areas that we thought we would focus on. We'll give you a list of these on screen, but we'll also put it in the show notes. We create a PDF for you guys to download if you like old school paper, or heck, you can load that on your phone. But I'm going to hit the first 5 really quick, and then we're going to let Melissa hit the next 5. And then we'll tell you which ones we're going to dig into a little more today. Areas we came up with, and these are not in any order. So this is not a top 10 list or anything. These are just 10 areas. First was communication styles and emotional expression. How do you learn how to read body language and those sort of things with your partner? What is your communication style? Do you like to address things head on, or do you need time to pause, think about? Second one was conflict resolution. Do you like to confront it? Do you like to avoid it? Do you like to compromise? Do you have to have your way? How do you come to agreement? Finances and spending. I'm not going to dig into this at all because we will do multiple episodes on this. This is a huge topic. It's a huge pain point and friction area for relationships. Time management and prioritization. How do you allocate your time? Do you work a lot? Do you spend time with friends? Do you spend quality time with your spouse or your significant other? Where you spend your time is really important. And if it's unbalanced and uneven, that can lead to conflict. And the last one I'm going to talk about here real quick is just career goals and ambition. We've already had an episode where we talked about dual careers. Sometimes you are wildly unbalanced in your development of your career. Sometimes you have different ambitions. One partner might be gung-ho and ready to attack careers. The others might be in a family growing mode. So those are areas of conflict. So that's the first 5. That was a lot.
It was.
We'll let Melissa hit the next 5 on the list.
Okay. The next 5, family boundaries and in-law involvement. What are the parental expectations? Or is your family trying to tell you how to raise your kids, or when to buy a home, or what job you should have? Values and long-term life goals. Beliefs about what your beliefs are about marriage, having kids, And sometimes people get together and they just assume that their significant other will come around. I put that in quotes to their way of thinking. The next one is lifestyle and living habits, can be area of conflict. What are your sleep schedules? Is one person a night owl and the other one's a morning person? And then we have emotional labor and relationship maintenance. And this is where does one partner feel like they are carrying the weight, doing all the work to make the relationship work? And finally, to round out the top 10 is boundaries around technology and privacy, access to each other's phones, differing expectations about that access. Like, should I have your passwords and should I be able to at any time say, hey, who you texting with?
So I think we just described life in general. Like every area of your life as a couple will probably have a potential for conflict and disagreement and angst and give and take. Yeah. So we can't possibly talk about all of those topics today, nor should we. But if we think back, what our focus for today is young love. Let's talk about how we're going to define young love for today's sake. Young love does not necessarily mean you're in your 20s and you're in love and all blissful. It can mean early days of relationships, young love, compared to ours, which is a little bit more mature than that. We've been doing
love?
this for like, yeah, I didn't go old love. That's rude. What are some of those core areas that are relevant when you're early on in life? So we're going to pick 3 of these today, and we're going to dig a little deeper and give you some examples of things you might be dealing with, examples of when we dealt with some of these things, and maybe you're still dealing with some of these things because old love, as you put it, still has these same areas of potential conflict. So the first one we really want to dig into is communication styles and misinterpretations. If you harken back to the episode where we talked about your profession, mental health therapist, we dug a lot into conflicts around communication and miscommunication. So let's just talk a little bit about that. But let's put this on the lens of when we were going through this 30 years ago. So what did communication in our early days look like?
Well, like today, there is the face-to-face. When you're with somebody, you talk. But there was no texting. Phones were on a cord. You had to be at home to talk on the phone. And so it's either you're listening to somebody via audio or you're in their presence. And so I feel that leaves a little bit less room for miscommunication. But
do you really believe that? I just saw the look on your face.
I do.
I don't know if you really believe that or not.
I do believe that. It doesn't take away all of it. But the stories I have heard about people texting and the way it's read into, I don't know. We didn't have those kind of.
Yeah. So let's harken back a little bit. So face-to-face communication brings difference than on your phone communication. So some of the things you get when you are in a room with somebody is I can catch the look on your face that you just had when you said that and question you. Did you actually believe what you just said? Because the look on your face gave me a signal that said you might not have been confident in what you just said. So picking up on tonal cues, picking up on facial expressions, picking up on body language when you meet in person is something. Now, were we good at it early on? No, we weren't good at picking up each other's tones and everything. So over time in a face-to-face relationship, you learn those things. In a modern texting digital world, you might not get those tonal things, right? Many times we've talked over the years about don't read tone into that email. Don't read tone into that text. Mm-hmm. Don't read too much into the one-word response. Maybe that person is just busy at the moment. Don't read too much into the fact that they didn't immediately respond. The immediacy, which leads to another point about communication. When we were really in our early young love phase, it wasn't as quick as it is now. So if we had a phone call, we get off the phone call, maybe we had a little bit of a disagreement. We couldn't continue that conversation again until we were in person or on the phone again. So that gave us a little bit of a cooling off time to maybe reflect and think on it a little bit. And we talked earlier about, or in a previous episode, we talked about different styles for conflict and how you want to deal with those. Some people might need a beat to take a moment to collect their thoughts. Well, in our early days, you had more time to do that. Now in this rapid fire technology, you might not have as much time to collect. But what's the side effect of having that extra time? What did it do to our feelings and stuff? You know where I'm going with this, right?
Yeah, not exactly.
Well, somebody in this relationship, not me, might have stewed on things, bottled things up,
Okay.
and then they would all come flowing out in either frustration
Yes.
or anger or disappointment or whatever, rather than dealing with it in real time. Is that a fair?
Yes. And in our young love, I was extremely emotional. Sometimes I didn't want to have those conversations because I knew I'd cry. And I didn't want crying to be that I was not weak per se, but that I was like overly emotional. And so I kept stuff to myself in the hope that it would just kind of go away. Now, obviously, as an adult and in my training, I know that does not work. That it's a very rare occurrence if things just go away on their own. So, yes, I definitely bottled until it got to be too much, or you pressured me on it, and then it all came out.
So I think the point here around communication and misinterpretation is that modern technology has really changed how we communicate. Some for the better, some for the worse. The ease of communication and the rapid fire nature is very nice, but you have to be careful with it and you have to learn to respect communication styles of your
Mhm.
partner. They might simply not have the capacity or the desire or the emotional stability to respond in real time. So you have to respect that. The second thing I would say is that some of the old school mechanisms of important conversations should be face to face.
Mhm.
You should be willing to take a beat, even in face to face conversations, and give yourselves time to collect and revisit a topic, or maybe things we need to harken back to and remember, right? Because humans weren't necessarily designed to communicate as fast as we do now. So our focus here is to look at, from that list of core areas of potential conflict, to look at those that are relevant for young love early on in a relationship. So a huge one in our perspective is time management, priorities, life balance. Now, if we think back to when we were in our early dating days, this was college time. We were super busy. I was playing collegiate sports. I was going to school. I had work, study, jobs. I had a social circle. I was in a fraternity. So my time was pulled in many, many different directions, as was yours. You were a student as well. You were working. You probably had friends. I don't know.
I did have friends. Not as organized as like a fraternity, because
I wasn't
college we went.
criticizing. I was just saying I don't remember what other things you were doing at that time.
Right, right. Yeah, I was hanging out with friends and
Right.
doing things with them.
So when you enter into relationships, how do you start to balance the time you're spending nurturing that relationship with all the other things that are going on in your early days of relationship? So, Melissa, what happens when that imbalance is wrong?
Yeah, one of the partners could start to feel neglected or like they're not as important, that they're not a priority. And so it comes down to discussing it again. And you know what? And maybe acknowledging that there are some times in our life that aren't going to be, they're a bit imbalanced, where, during soccer season, for instance, when you were playing in college, I'm going to get less of your time because you had practice every night, you had games, you were traveling. So kind of being accepting of that and not getting upset about that. It's not that I'm lower on the priority, but I could see how some people would feel, and I've heard do feel that, oh, it's always about this or this, and it's never about me. And that can cause a rift.
We strive for balance over the long haul, but at any given moment, you're probably going to have some imbalance, right? And it feels like almost every one of these areas of potential conflict come back to a few easy ways to resolve them. Communication being top of that list, right? Clear communication about what are your time requirements, because sometimes it might be perceived that you don't want to be together, but reality is you have these other demands that are more timely, or they're more
Mhm.
pressing, or they're time sensitive, or they're core issues. I got to make my money. I got to go to work. I have to do schooling. I can't graduate if I don't. Like, there's some that have deadlines or timelines to them. I couldn't necessarily skip training. I couldn't skip games. I was getting paid to be an athlete. That was part of my
Right.
my thing. But I could communicate better around why certain things couldn't happen at certain times. And then the other thing I would say on this is that early in love or early in relationships, I think it's reasonable to expect that there's more priority spent in some areas.
Mm.
I'm still very much an individual at that point. I have my my collegiate career, I had my schooling, I had my work. You were just one piece of what was going on in my life. But as we got more and more serious, you became a larger piece of what was going on in my life. So I had to deprioritize some of the other things. Is that a fair statement of young love as it progresses?
Yeah, definitely. And it makes sense if you think about it.
It does here, but I don't know that it does here for some people, right? They want, if you're in early infatuation, you might want more time than a person can give you.
Mhm.
And if you read too much into that as being, well, they just don't want to spend time with me, they're prioritizing the other things, it does speak to different levels of commitment. And you got to use that to assess where are you in your relationship. But I think some people run too hot too quick, and others are probably a slow burn that takes too long, right? So like finding that balance.
Right.
And I think we had a little bit of that. I mean, we definitely tested boundaries and stuff more so than me, than you in college, of like, no, I need more personal time and more space and whatever. Whereas I think you were much closer to being set to be serious than I was. I took a little bit longer to
Right.
sort of do more of that social and partying and disconnected time than you did. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah. And I think I did feel the things that we were talking about earlier, which is I didn't feel I was a priority. And, how much time should I spend on somebody that doesn't make me a priority? And thinking through that. And I think that's pretty common in a relationship.
Well, and I think that's there comes a time in every relationship where you're going to have those pressure tests, right?
Mhm.
And I think a natural arc, and I was reading something the other day that was this like 5 phases that all relationships go through. And I don't, it's ironic we're giving a top 10 or a 10 list. And I was like, I don't really believe in these 5 phases, but the psychologist sitting next to me or the therapist sitting next to me go, oh yeah, there's definitely 5 phases or 3 phases or whatever. But one of those was you're inevitably going to go through a point where your relationship gets pressure tested,
Mm.
and you have to figure out, is this the time to lean in and really make something of this, or is this a time to step away? And sometimes you temporarily step away, which clearly happened with us. We stepped away for a little while, and it gave me the space I needed to realize, oh no, wait a minute. When these things are out of my life, my priorities are really all messed up and it doesn't work. And I think that helped me come back to be much more prioritizing this in my relationship. So that sort of, was it, absence makes the heart
Heart
grow
grow
fonder?
fonder.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I pulled that.
But you're right. You don't know. Sometimes you don't know what you're missing till it's
Sure,
gone,
exactly.
kind of thing. And I think that's what happened. And at the time, I wasn't appreciative of you taking that time. But then when we did get back together, it felt right, and I knew, okay, he's making this choice because he gave us some thought, and he's back. So yay! And so hindsight was that was good for us.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess I think that's a pretty good exploration of that. We'll probably dig into in a future episode more details around that because there's lots of stories around how that happened, and
Lots of stories.
some I might not want to share, but I guess that's the part of transparency and authenticity, is we'll share some of those stories.
Right.
I probably don't look too good in many of those stories, so we'll see how it goes. I'm going to try to paint them all against you somehow, but probably won't work.
Well, I can honestly say you've redeemed yourself since then.
I mean, I got 30 plus years of
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
but
proof
still,
now, right?
you know what? Some people keep making the same mistakes over and over again.
yeah,
And
fair enough.
people stay in relationships because it's easier to do so, even if it's a hard relationship. So,
Right. All right, let's hit one more and then we'll move on to our next segment. So the last one we want to hit, emotional labor and unequal effort. This comes down to who is quote unquote doing more in the relationship. So does one of you make all the plans, remember all the important details, start all the, and again, air quote city today, deep conversations, whatever the heck that means. 30 years ago, well, let's talk about how was that viewed 30 years ago? Who was responsible for that and how did that work?
women were the
As
feelers.
it should be. That's going to get me in trouble. I shouldn't say stuff like that.
Yeah, well, it shows a little bit of your personality.
It's a joke. Take a
Yes,
joke.
the part of your personality that is very humorous. So women were the feelers, were the ones that were supposed to, if there was anything going on, they were supposed to broach the topic. They were supposed to bring it up.
Give me some examples of in a relationship. Okay, again, early relationship, but as it progresses and becomes not so early, what are the things that you're talking about that they would take, that historically the female in the relationship would take ownership of?
Yeah. That's a good question. Oftentimes the first one to say they love the
Mm.
other. I think
I mean, I've said it once. Why do I need to say it again? It's always been my philosophy.
Oh, we'll have to tell that story later about where we heard that and how that has become a part of it. Because it's
a little laughing part of our.
But it's also unique. And I'll tell you why when we discuss that. I find that's very, that's very unique. So what was the question again? It was.
What are some examples that women historically have taken the lead on in relationships? I mean, I can pop through some of them if you want me to.
It's, taking, like you said, remembering the dates. So like, what's our wedding anniversary date, Michael?
I hate this question. I know it. It's in June. And the only reason I know this is because we had this conversation recently. I always want to say June 20th, and I have no idea why, but it is stuck in my head, and it's wrong. It's June 21st.
July.
Oh, July. Dang it. I even said the wrong month this time. Dang it. I was so focused on I know it's 21, not 22. I missed the month. Whatever.
But remembering family birthdays and, oh, hey, Michael, it's your dad's birthday next week. Do you want me to get him a gift? Yeah. And kind of taking the things that I don't want to say they're not important. They are important, but in a different way than getting the bills paid or mowing the lawn or.
Right. And I think it expands beyond that. It's also the who is planning date night, or who is saying, hey, we haven't connected in a while. Let's go hang out and do this. Or who is willing to have the hard conversations or start the hard conversations. Those are all the emotional things that it takes to run a relationship. And 30 years ago, and even when we started off very early, a lot of those things fell to you. Maybe not the starting conversations part of it, but definitely the nurturing the couple's commitments part of it. Like, hey, my dad's birthday's coming up, or hey, so-and-so is getting married, or any of those sort of things that I might not have found of immediate importance, but they're good for nurturing and being part of a community and being part of a family.
That's good.
And I think the focus today is much more, and there's a good reason for this, which maybe you want to talk to in a second. If one person is carrying all that load, it becomes, how does it impact a relationship?
Resentful.
Yeah, exactly. That's the key word I would go with.
I always fill in the blank. There's so many different things. Which is different from, we have different strengths or I think we discussed in an earlier episode about how I'm allergic to grass, so you do that. So it's different than that. We've identified that these are the things that you do and these are the things that I do. And I think that's normal. I like typical better than normal because what's normal? But some of the other things are, if it comes down to you always doing those things, you start to get resentful and want to know, why do I have to do all this? Why? Why can't he or why can't she take some responsibility for this or some ownership for this? I'm the one that always does whatever that thing is. Initiate conversations or.
I think it's safe to say that early on in our relationship, there was a big imbalance in there. Today, it's much less of an imbalance. I handle a lot more of the things, and these are simple examples, but I deal with gift giving and acknowledgement of birthdays and celebrations on my family's side. You chip in, but I don't depend on you to do that stuff. I keep track of that stuff. There's lots of other examples on there, but it is one of those things where you have to evolve over time, and the expectation is a lot different now than it was 30 years ago. Well, I think that's more than a good dive into core areas. So that moves us on to one of our recurring segments. And this one we refer to as inked moments. And this is when we take today's topic and we want to go back in the vault into the memory banks, and we want to tell a little something or story that is relevant to today's topic, and just share a memory from our past. So we've been a little heavy on some of these topics at this point. Like, these have been serious core areas of disagreement. So we're going to go a little lighter, hopefully, on this segment. We'll see if this is actually a little lighter. But we thought today we would just share, thinking back 30 years, just when we started living together, what was a pet peeve you had about living together and living with your man for the first time, or living with your woman for the first time? So you want to share one? And I say one because I know you have a ton of them.
Well, before I start, I just want to say you're pretty easy to live with.
No, I'm not, but go on. That's nice of you to say.
And you were then as well. However, you liked to fall asleep with the TV on. or even music. And I have a lot of wind chimes, birds chirping. I like it to be quiet.
Fingers tapping, whistling. Just go on.
Oh, whistling. Oh boy. Anyway, so for me, I need it very quiet. I need a calm, soothing environment to fall asleep. And that was something we discussed for a while, because for a while, I think you said you needed to have some type of background noise, because you had always done that your whole life.
Yeah, for sure.
And I do remember that we had multiple discussions on that. It was that trying to adjust to what you needed and what I needed. And that's a hard one to compromise, because that's kind of a all or nothing.
Yeah, it took a while. It took a while to adjust to that. Okay, my pet peeve. We have different definitions on what clean is. Not clean as in like cleaning stuff, but more in the sense of straightening up. If you were to look at my desk in my office, not at the moment because we're recording, so it's got a bunch of crap on it. But my desk has like 4 things on it, and it's super clean, and everything has its place. And when I say, hey, I'm going to clean up something, I mean I'm going to put everything away where it goes. Your definition of clean up stuff is I'm going to make organized piles all over the damn place. And so I had to get used to the fact that when you say you were going to clean or straighten something up, it didn't mean it was actually going to be put away or gone. It just meant it was going to be somewhat minimized and organized and stacked.
Neater,
yeah, exactly. And so that one still runs to today. If you look at our counter downstairs where the mail goes, about every week it gets straightened up. And I think it got straightened up a couple days ago. And I still would not be at all calling that straightened up. But it's like, it's fine. But that is a pet peeve that, was early on and is still prevalent. So, or still present.
Some things don't have a place and you don't know what to do with them.
Everything has a place. And if it doesn't have a place, you don't need it. You don't need it in your life. Let's talk about how our approach to conflict and disagreement has grown over the years, how our communication styles have changed. And we thought it would be fun if we did sort of a decades approach to this, because although we're talking young love, our young love happened to start in our teens, in our 20s. And so we have this unique perspective of being able to look back and go, as a hot-headed 20-year-old or an emotional 20-year-old, how did we communicate? Then as a less hot-headed and a less emotional 30-year-old, how did we communicate in our 30s? As mature 40s and all the things that were going on there, and maybe having learned a little bit, how do we communicate in our 40s? And dare I say, how do we communicate now in our early 50s? Now, as an aside, I say early 50s, just holding on to that. Our daughter Alexa listened to our first episode the other day, and she is 25. She will be 26 in November. And her takeaway from that first episode is when we referred to having daughters in their mid-20s. And she's like, what? I'm in my mid-20s? And she mathematically and intellectually knew it, but to hear it said out loud was something that shook her to her core, which was pretty dang funny. So we are very comfortably in our early 50s. Let's talk about our 20s. What did disagreements look like in our 20s, and how did we deal with them? Go.
Well, as we mentioned earlier, I tend to keep things close to the chest at that time. And it took me a while to share things. I'm more of a stewer. That was my personality at the time, is that in my 20s. And so didn't share a whole lot.
Yep. What was a main, think of an example of conflict or disagreement in our 20s?
Love you girls, but the decision to have them and when. I was in my last year of grad school and I was starting to get the baby itch. And I brought it up to you, if I'm remembering correctly. And you're like, but you're almost done. And then you're going to start your career. I thought something to that effect.
Yeah.
And it was upsetting to me because I had been thinking about it for a while, but hadn't shared it. And probably should have shared it maybe a year before that to say, hey, I'm thinking when I graduate, we have kids and then I start my career.
Yeah, I think that's a great example of miscommunication, misexpectations, and how do we resolve through that? Because in my mind, you had put all this time, energy, and money into grad school immediately out. And I think we had talked before you started grad school about timing on some of these things. Okay. And so in my mind, path had been laid out to us of you were going to complete grad school work for a little while, and then we were going to have kids. And I think in your mind, either that was just a point of miscommunication or something changed during your 3 years in grad school, because that's a long time when you're in your 20s, and you started having more of a desire to have children earlier and didn't early communicate that. So now as you're reaching this what I thought was the next phase was you working for a while, us being a dual income financially building couple started to pivot to. So yeah, I think that's a good example. How did we get through that? Besides just saying you won, because I mean you did, but
we
how do we get through
discussed.
that? Yeah,
We many discussions, and that's the thing with a lot of these topics. It's not just one and done. It's an ongoing dialogue about each person's needs and wants. So I worked for a year. We just discussed it, and
many times and got to a decision. Yeah. So let's look into our 30s just to keep this sort of moving through the decades. What was going on in our 30s? Let's see. Kids were in full kid raising mode, right? So that was a time of stress around you got kids and activities. But we had sort of made the commitment to be very aggressive with clearing up consumer debt, student debt, and all that sort of stuff. So we had sort of dual pressures going on at that time. Family life was good. Family life was solid. Kids were healthy, but finances were really a pressure, and the desire that every parent has, which is to give their kids experiences and that sort of stuff. So I'd say in our 30s was maybe our most decade of conflict, just because we had all these different pressures on us. We had career growth. You were, for most of that, were stay at home, right? It's sort of the later 30s that you went back into the career force.
Mid
30s.
The girls were 6, and I had them. Yeah. So
Okay,
I was like 33.
Yeah. Okay. So early to mid 30s, you started going back into work. Finances were a bit of a big conflict in there. But I think this is when how I dealt with some of these topics probably started to change quite a bit. So I was less reactive on these things and was much more, I'd learned more about how we were going to resolve these conflicts and move through them. I probably became, kids will either take away all your patience or they'll make you more patient. I think they made me more patient in many of these things.
Definitely for me.
I also think this was probably the period of the most stress where I would probably not communicate stuff as much, because I knew you had strong desires to do things with the girls or to be stay at home or to do activities and stuff that I couldn't quite relate to, where I was feeling a lot of pressure of, we got to get rid of this debt. Our kids are young. They don't know anything right now. They don't care about what we're doing our money. Can we get ourselves into a position where we are financially better by the time they actually care about this stuff? Most kids don't care if they're in gymnastics when they're 4 and 5. Moms and dads might care about it tremendously. Most kids don't care about it. They just want activities and fun, whatever. I don't think it's a core memory for many kids that they were in gymnastics at 4, but we stress over those things and say, can we put them in there 4? So I think for me, that was a pretty conflict-filled decade. I don't know what your perception of that is.
Yeah, I was just thinking toward the end I think I started my private practice when I was 38. And that piece was definitely stressful.
Yeah.
It was different when I worked for the agencies. I didn't feel that it was as stressful, but that played a role in the stress that we experienced during that time too.
We'll probably revisit some of those stories, because I think that was a time when the focus of our podcast is much more our relationship. But to have a long relationship where you've had and raised kids and not have episodes that talk about parenting and how you approach those is unrealistic, because that was a huge part of our life. But really, particularly, it consumed all of our 30s. I mean, our 30s were full on kids and family life. So we'll definitely revisit some of those areas, and we'll get into some of the real pressures we had in those times. And we alluded to a couple of them, but there was a lot more that sort of happened in there. So let's jump into our 40s. I always kind of knew our 40s was going to be an awesome decade, partially because we were spending so much conscious effort in our 20s and 30s to put ourselves in a good position, that I knew our 40s was going to be good. And one of those things that I knew was going to happen in our 40s that I was super excited about was, since we had our kids so early, we were going to become younger empty nesters, which was going to be great. And so let's talk a little bit about our 40s.
It was exciting. I remember it like it was yesterday, the girls getting into college and the college that they wanted. And it was exciting and a little bit sad too. For those of you that have twins, they leave at the same time. And if those are your only children, which they were for us, it was sad. I cried for a whole weekend And then
I gave them a whole 48 hours of
I
emotion.
did. And then it was like, we could do dinner when we wanted. We could eat whatever we wanted. It didn't have to be kid friendly. It could be, and to see them grow and change, and they did great in college, and watching that, it just felt good. And like you said, we were in a good place. I feel when you have fewer stressors, there's less conflict. And so that's what I remember from the past decade was less conflict, especially after the 30s being so.
Yeah, I would. So I'm going to put a little bit of a, not a disagreement, but just a slightly different spin on there. We have this default of saying disagreements and conflict is always negative. And it's not always negative. Sometimes disagreements are super healthy and they help you refine where your priorities are and stuff. And I would say we had different conflict and we had different disagreements in our 40s. And they were much more positive because it was all of a sudden all the money we'd been putting towards saving for college or paying down our mortgage or doing this other stuff, some of those dollars freed up. Well, how I wanted to spend them didn't always align to how you wanted to spend those dollars. And so it's a new area of conflict, as in we had different, or we had varied ambitions with those things. And I remember very intentionally on a few different topics, specifically around money, like blindly saying, okay, hey, make a list of your top 10 priorities right now financially. I'm going to make a list of my 10 things. Like, we got this extra $1,000. What would you do with it? What would I do with it? And then we would come back and we would sort of do very nerdy mathematicals on that and look at and say, well, if we combine these scores, like, this is sort of what our top priority is. Does that make sense? And those were areas of conflict, but they were positive conflicts because you're dealing with a little bit of abundance in life, or conflicts around how does dinner prep change when it's just the two of us? And now all of a sudden the world is your menu and we still have personal likes and dislikes and those sort of things. And just because you can eat at a different time, if someone's conditioned to eat at a certain time, how do you shift those eating times? And so I think there were just different conflicts, different disagreements, but yeah, awesome disagreements. So yeah, the transition to empty nesters really was positive in many ways. And some of that was since we had laid the foundation on how to communicate in the what I would call the tougher times of our 30s and our 40s, our 30s, early 40s, we were in a good position to flourish in those things.
Yeah, you said flourish. I was thinking growth.
Yeah.
I think our relationship grew during
for sure
during that time as we were kind of reinventing ourselves, because for 18 years we had been this. And so obviously the girls still came home a lot. COVID started. They lived with us for a while after that, but in general, I think it was a very positive growing time for our relationship.
Let's talk about our 50s. And we're very early in our 50s. So we only have what?
Some of us earlier than others.
Yeah. We only have a couple years of experience in our 50s, but how do we sort of see this decade starting off and going?
Yeah, I think the focus has been a bit more on retirement, talking about the finances around that. How much do we want? What does that look like? When do we want to retire? Yeah, I think it's been more of a, what, and there's the priority piece as well. You love to travel. I love to travel too. I don't have quite the bug you do, but quite a bit. How much are the resources go? As we get older and have the ability, you're set in your career, you can do different things than when you're trying to make it out there. And since we're so set, we can take time off. We can choose to do certain things. And so I feel we're more future focused, I guess.
Yeah. And I think we're in these get into foo-foo-y sort of sounding things, but I think we're back again in a vision setting period. We're trying to really map out where do we want to see ourselves in 5 or 10 years. And we've always been pretty good about this. I think in our 30s and 40s, it was a little more survival mode. Like, just life was really coming at you fast. Now we're sort of in the mode of we have options. We've done a lot of hard work. We're in a good position. What do we want it to look like? And I think that comes with its own set of conflicts. And what do you prioritize versus what I prioritize? And what are the differences there? And I'm having to deal with and learn and remind myself that we're going to have differences and that's okay. And how do we compromise on those things and which things do we compromise and not? Because some of the things you value, I just struggle with. I don't see the value in them, and vice versa. Some of the things that I value, you don't have that affinity for, and that speaks back to that we are not the same person. We're two individuals in a relationship. We're going to have differences there.
Yeah. And it's not like your values are bad or mine are,
Right. And I think now we're just way more clear on that sort of stuff. Plus, we've also learned, back to the earlier, we know when we're hitting an area of sensitivity with somebody, and we're better at how to deal with that when it comes up. And we know how to give each other space or time, or sometimes just to bite the bullet and go straight into it because it's time to do that. So yeah, I think we're getting better at that. All right. So before we get to our closing segment, we've got one more little segment. We're going to do this one as a little bit of a rapid fire because, as I mentioned, this has been a heavy episode. We've had lots of topics and lots of things, but we always like to give you some things to just remind you that you're not alone. You're going through things that we've all gone through. So in this segment, we're going to talk about common mistakes we've made that we would bet a lot of money that you are making as well, because we all make these same mistakes. And this could be its own show. And we've repeated this over and over and over again. And we probably will do a mistakes show, because who doesn't like to celebrate the mistakes we've made and live vicariously and feel like, well, I've made mistakes, but man, they really messed up, because I think there's a little bit of that. But let's just hit through. We're going to go to 4 of them.
Okay.
So the first one is thinking my partner understood what I was communicating. Talk a little about that.
I said it so clearly. How could they misinterpret that? It does go back to an earlier episode of active versus reflective listening. Active is nodding and making eye contact. Reflecting is saying, so what I'm hearing you say is, or it seems like you're having, and it gives your partner the opportunity to correct anything or to expand on anything. But a lot of people feel I was extremely clear that they should just get it.
Yeah. And we've already hit one of our big miscommunications that happened over multiple conversations, which was timing of kids. So like, it happens. I thought I had heard you. You thought you had heard me. We thought we were on the same page. We clearly weren't. And it had to adjust. So I think that is definitely something that we all do and struggle. We have gotten much better about the reflective piece of it and clarifying. And we've also gotten better with the little tip of, don't just repeat the words. Like, if I need you to communicate it again to me, you have to figure out a different way to say it. You can't just repeat the same words, because I understood your words.
Right.
I just don't understand the concept behind your words. So try it again in a different way. So if you're hitting this, you think you've communicated, but you haven't, make sure that you're really clear with it. Yeah. And then don't just keep saying the same thing again, because I understand your words. Just don't understand the meaning behind your words.
Something I see all the time, that I just want everybody to pause and think about that one. You don't just keep saying the same thing over and over again. Because,
but if I say it louder and more aggressively, exactly, they will understand it.
Yeah, no. Rephrase it, maybe even reframe it so that put it in a different, and you might have to do that a couple times. It doesn't always happen on your first rephrasing. So.
Second one, thinking we define quality time the same. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Watching TV together. Somebody thinks, well, we're just doing that. That's what we do over dinner. Where one person might think that's quality time. The other one might be, well, we got to eat. That's not really setting. Some people feel that quality time is you're setting a date, you're going out, you spend the day together. And sometimes they mistake quantity for quality. So it's important, once again, to communicate about that. What is quality? And if there is a difference between the partners on what they think quality time is, that's where compromise comes in.
This next one is a big one for you, so I'm going to let you talk to this one. Taking each other for granted, not expressing appreciation.
Yeah. And I will say that not everybody needs to be thanked, but the vast majority, behaviorism was built on, B.F. Skinner, he based behavior on, we want positive reinforcement. It makes us repeat those behaviors more. So if you never tell me thank you for making dinner, I'm the cook in the family. If you never said thank you, maybe I wouldn't want to do it as much. But without fail, every single night, you tell me thank you for dinner. And to this day, even though you do it all the time, it still makes me feel good. Okay, he noticed. that field. People want to hear that. So even if it's their job, mow the lawn, I still say, the yard looks nice. Thank you so much. And I mean it. And, or just appreciation for being you. I think we might have mentioned that in an earlier episode as well. I hear a lot of relationships that are not healthy ones. And it makes me appreciate what I have. So sometimes I come in at the end of the day, I say, thanks for being such a good guy and for being such a good partner. So yes, expression and appreciation, even if you don't think it's necessary because, well, it's your job. That's what you do.
Yeah.
Is important. Yeah.
And then the last one, and this is a big one. I actually heard a term on this the other day that made me laugh. Relying too much on your partner, expecting them to meet all of your needs. So the term I heard the other day, which was great, and it talked about women who in relationships become the full social circle, support circle, emotional, physical, everything for their husband. And they referred to it as man keeping. And I thought it was so offensive, but so funny. and so speak a little bit about man keeping.
Yeah. And, there are also some, the opposite.
Oh,
of that. Is there another term?
There wasn't, but yeah.
Is there a woman keeping?
I mean, there probably is, but in this case, that was not the slant of this particular social account was bad men.
I truly believe there is no way that there is anybody in this universe that can meet 100% of our needs. I have certain friends that I go to if I need a shoulder to cry on, certain friends that, if I'm upset about something that I want to talk, so I have different people, and you can't expect your significant other to be everything for you. And expecting that to be the case, it doesn't mean you don't have a healthy relationship if you go to other people or have other ways to meet certain needs, because there is no way that one person can meet all of your needs. It's just, and that's what we would call an unrealistic expectation.
Yeah. So there are certain needs you should only get from your partner.
Absolutely.
Let's say that. However, to be the end all doesn't there. And this goes back to the concept of the best relationships are two individuals that come together. And if you lose your individuality, you're no longer going to be the strongest couple you can be. Cool?
Yep.
All right. So let's move to our closing segment. Pen to paper. This is where we want to give you a tangible takeaway of something related to today's topic that you can do in your own life. Today has been all about young love. And one of our guidances for you is in your young love, when you're having conflict, is to address issues early. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of why do you need to address issues early?
If you don't address issues early, they build and they build and they become bigger than maybe they needed to be. It's important to share things, maybe not the instant you feel them, give time to some thought, but don't let things build up over days and weeks. And for some people, dare I say months, where there's something that's bothering them and they're not saying anything. So of course that thing's going to continue to happen potentially, unless you say something. And so they get more resentful. They just start feeling it. When I used to work with kids, I told them, I used the volcano metaphor. Strong feelings that you're not sharing is like lava, and it will just keep going. And eventually it's going to come out the top and it's going to explode. And then you're probably going to have an unhealthy discussion about that. Probably an argument, something that you might say, it's just better that along the way. And so I often encourage people to have check-ins, relationship check-ins. It's something, how are we doing this week? Or I feel we're kind of off. Let's talk about it. Right.
That's your pen to paper. Have those conversations. Don't avoid.
Yes.
All right.
Absolutely.
I think we've covered a ton about navigating young love. Anything else you want to add for today?
I don't think so. Because like you said, that was a lot of stuff.
There's a lot in that episode. In our next episode, one of the things I keep forgetting to do is look at our next episode. So this is growth. I looked at what our next episode topic is. And we're going to talk about several defining moments in our relationship. And we're going to see how those milestones have helped strengthen our bond and shaped our long-lasting love. Anything else you want to cover?
No, I think that was great.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us today. We always appreciate it. We invite you to connect with us, share a comment, ask a question. If you like this content, give us a like, leave a comment, positive review, and remember to subscribe to hear our next episode. That's it. All All right. Thank you, everyone.
Take care.